Good afternoon everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar hosted by SEMLEP and the Velocity Growth Hub. My name is Anna Morrison and I'm going to be your presenter for today. There's massive changes coming in the way that apprenticeships are funded from the 1st of May next year, and we've tried to summarise the government policy and guidance as much as we currently know into this 1-hour webinar. There's going to be lots of questions, I'm sure, so we will allow a really good amount of time at the end for all of these. You'll probably be aware that the apprenticeship policy is still emerging, so there have been various consultations happening throughout the summer which could still change things slightly in the future, but we're going to share with you everything that we know. Anything that we don't know the answer to, we promise to take away, and we'll do our best to get you the answers as soon as we can. All of the guidance around the Apprenticeship Levy is actually available on gov.uk, so we'll provide you with the links for these at the end of the webinar. What we're planning to cover for you today is what the Apprenticeship Levy is, how it's calculated and paid, what you can spend your Apprenticeship Levy on, and how you find and select a training provider. And then, like I said, lots of time for Q&A at the end. Just to familiarise yourself with the controls for today, because not everyone will have used GoToWebinar before. I can see that most of you are either listening in through your computer or your telephone. If at any point your audio doesn't work on either of these, then you can switch it. So you just need to click on the audio button and it should then give you the telephone number so that you can dial in. Two other things to let you know about. There is a raise hand function, so if you can find the little yellow hand that's appearing on your screen, it may be transparent if you're listening in through an iPad, and if you can press it for me, then that will tell me that the hand button is working. It's kind of like putting your hand up in class, so if at any point you want to get my attention, please press that button and I'll then know that you're trying to speak to me. It's probably better if you save it till the end, just so that we can double check if there's anything that you're trying to get my attention for that we can answer. So I'll just put those down. And then there's also the questions box. So if you're not really feeling brave enough to put your hand up and be unmuted and it turns into a bit of a radio broadcast, then you can type your question as we go into the questions pane, and at the end of the webinar I can pull all of those through. So just to check that the questions pane is working, if you can just type in which town you're listening in from today, please. That would be really useful. It just makes sure that everyone can participate and we can see where everyone's listening in from today. So brilliant, I can see Wellingborough, I can see Luton, I can see Milton Keynes, I can see Bedford. Fantastic, so we've got lots of different answers coming through. So let's move on to the detail of the Apprenticeship Levy. So what is the Apprenticeship Levy? You will need to pay the Apprenticeship Levy if you are an employer in any sector with a pay bill of more than £3 million each year. The pay bill includes wages, bonuses, commissions, pension contributions and anything else classed as profit coming from employment. The levy does not get charged on other payments such as benefits in kind. And like I said, you will only pay the levy if your pay bill exceeds £3 million in a given year. There is lots of detailed guidance around national insurance contributions and what would be classed as kind of earnings either for class 1 or secondary threshold contributions. It's worth looking at the detail that's on gov.uk because it really kind of sets out what will be included. But basically it's wages, bonuses, commissions, pension contributions and anything else that would be classed as profit coming from employment. Let's look at how it's calculated. So the levy is charged at a rate of 0.5% of your entire annual pay bill. You will also have a levy allowance of £15,000 per year to offset against the levy, and this will only be given to employers who are levied employers. So one of the questions that I get quite often is, will any employer get that £15,000 allowance? And the answer is no. It's only applicable for levied employers, so those whose pay bill is in excess of £3 million per year. Also, the £15,000 is not a real cash amount, so I'm afraid you won't see it in your bank account. It works a little bit like the personal tax allowance in that it's a virtual amount that will be offset at source. The £15,000 will be calculated on a monthly basis and it will accumulate throughout the year. There is also going to be a credit system for any unused allowance that relates to a previous tax year in order to reduce the levy. So if you've got multiple PAYE schemes and you don't use the full £15,000 allowance, the guidance currently says that you will be able to offset the unused amount against another one of your schemes once the tax year has ended. On top of this, there is also going to be a 10% top-up from the government which will be applied monthly. So I know this is a bit confusing, so let's just work through it. And we've got an example of what you will pay. So if an employer has an annual pay bill of £5 million, the levy sum will be 0.5% times £5 million. So that would give you a total levy bill for that year of £25,000. Then what you would do is subtract the levy allowance of £15,000, leaving you with an annual levy payment of £10,000. Plus then you would get the 10% top up in year one. So your total amount would be brought up to £11,000 in that first year. Now this gets calculated monthly. So I've done a kind of a calculation of a total annual pay bill, but if you imagine that being split across the 12 months of the year. Gov.uk have put forward a free calculator that you can access. I'll send you these slides at the end of the webinar as well so that you can go on and use that link, so don't worry if you can't quite scribble it down in time. The levy will be paid to HMRC through Pay As You Earn, PAYE, alongside tax and national insurance contributions. So if you've calculated that you're going to be paying the apprenticeship levy, as an employer you will need to declare this and include it in your usual PAYE payment to HMRC by the 19th of each month or by the 22nd if you report electronically. So therefore the first submission in which you will declare that you will pay the levy will be in May 2017. The guidance says that any apprenticeship levy payment to HMRC will be allowable for corporation tax, and the money will then be transferred into your digital account, which we're going to show you on the next slide. So a monthly calculation to HMRC through PAYE, and that money will then appear in your digital apprenticeship service account, and that's where you will then get the 10% top up as well from the government in the first year. So I've given you a screenshot of what the digital apprenticeship service potentially will look like in the future. At the moment it's going to be hosted on gov.uk and you're going to be able to register to create your account from January 2017. So through the digital apprenticeship service there's actually going to be a few other functions. It's not just going to be an account. You're going to be able to access information on apprenticeships. It will help you to find training providers to help you to develop and deliver your apprenticeship programme, and it will help you to select the appropriate training, so you'll be able to see the entire apprenticeship offer, the range of different apprenticeships that are available at the different levels, and really work through what's going to be right for your business. There's going to be separate arrangements in place for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and we're going to go into the kind of devolved policy a little bit later on. So the online tools for employers will be available via the digital apprenticeship service over the next year. Like I said, you will be able to register and to create your account from January 2017, and then you'll be able to familiarise yourself with the service. Once you've registered, you'll need to verify your PAYE schemes and link them to your account. You will be able to use more than one account if you'd like to keep your schemes separate. So it's up to you as an employer, if you've got multiple PAYE schemes, as to whether you join them together or keep them separate. If you're in a group of companies connected for the purposes of paying the levy, then your group will be able to collect their funds together into one digital account. So your group would do this by registering to have those PAYE schemes attached to a single digital account. Since you can only use funds in your digital account to pay for apprenticeship training for your own employees, employers that are not connected will not be able to pool their funds into that digital account. Where you do group your PAYE schemes together, it's worth remembering that you will then only be able to use one of the £15,000 levy allowances. You won't get one per organisation or one per company that gets grouped together. If you are part of a group of connected employers, then you're going to need to decide what proportion of the levy allowance each employer in the group is going to be entitled to. And you'll have to take this decision at the beginning of the tax year, and it will be fixed for that tax year, unless a correction is necessary, because the total amount of the levy allowance claimed across the group will be calculated on those arrangements that get put in place at the beginning of the year. So hopefully that makes sense. I think this is another one of those areas where we really do need a bit more guidance, and there should be more guidance coming out in October that we will be able to look at that gives us the detail of how to connect companies together. So looking at employers who operate in England and other parts of the UK. So the levy will apply to employers across the UK. The amount that enters your digital apprenticeship service account will be how much you have available to spend on apprenticeship training in England. So because apprenticeships are a devolved policy, which means that the authorities in each of the UK nations manage their own apprenticeship programmes, including how the funding is spent on apprenticeship training, you're going to need to look at the arrangements to support employees in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, aside from the English apprenticeship service. To calculate how much you will have to spend through the English system, the government plan to use data that they already hold about the home address of your employees. And they will use this data to work out what proportion of your pay bill is already paid to employees living in England, and they will make that assessment in early 2017 and will announce the exact date in advance of the levy launching in May 2017. Employers will be able to update employees' addresses as part of their real-time information returns, and I think it's fair to say the government are testing the accuracy and suitability of this approach, and we're going to get more detail coming out in October. So really what we're looking at is a bit more detail in October, probably early in 2017, to see the indicative calculations and to do some testing through registering your account and then being able to play around with it and hopefully giving you the opportunity to spot any errors or gremlins in the system. Expiry of funds in your digital account. So the money that goes into your apprenticeship account through the digital apprenticeship service will expire 18 months after it goes into your digital account unless you spend it on apprenticeship training. And this will also apply to any top-ups, the 10% top-up in your digital account. So for example, if funds were to enter your account in September 2017, they will expire in March 2019, 18 months later, unless you've spent them. And money is spent or considered spent when it leaves your digital account as a payment to a training provider. And we're going to go on to explain how this works. The account will work on a first in, first out basis, either through payment or expiry. So whenever a payment is taken from your digital account, it will automatically use the funds that entered your account first, and this should minimise the amount of expired funds, and this will happen automatically. Your digital account will let you know in good time when any funds are due to expire so that you can arrange to spend them if you wish to. And that's the reason why we've got a sunset on the screen for you. So sunsetting is the term that's being used for apprenticeship funds that are due to expire. So about 6 months before they're due to expire, you will be able to see very clearly on your account those funds that are at risk of expiry unless they get used, so that you can manage your account effectively. Your training provider or training providers, if you decide to use more than one, will also be able to help you with this. We've had quite a lot of questions about whether an employer will be able to direct their levy funds to another employer. So in the first year of the levy, you will only be able to use the funds in your digital account to pay for apprenticeship training and assessment for your own employees. The main aim of the Apprenticeship Levy is to support employers in growing the number and the quality of apprenticeships in their own workforce. However, we do know that some employers want to use funds in their digital account to pay for apprenticeship training of other employers' apprentices, for example, someone in their supply chain. There was a consultation that happened in August about whether this should be permitted from year 2 onwards, so from May 2018 onwards, and there was a question in the consultation about 10%. So the government were proposing that up to 10% of an employer's digital funds could be given away to another employer of your choosing. Now, that was in the consultation. Again, we're waiting for the response at the end of October for that. So we're going to have to wait and see what comes out. But definitely kind of that question about being able to move those funds around is there. This also links to working with an ATA, an apprenticeship training agency. So an ATA arrangement is where the apprenticeship training agency, a bit like a recruitment agency, will actually employ the apprentice on behalf of yourself, on behalf of the employer. We know that some employers want to use the funds in their digital account to pay for the training of apprentices that they've got employed through the ATA. So this was part of the consultation. At the moment, it looks like in the first year of the new system, levied employers will not be able to transfer any of their digital funds to an ATA, but we're going to have to wait and see what comes out at the end of October. If you want any more information about ATAs, and I know that lots of organisations do use apprenticeship training agencies to get around issues to do with recruitment freezes and headcount freezes, then please let us know, because we'll be more than happy to put you in touch with our local apprenticeship training agencies. So going on to selecting a training provider. So you will, as an employer, need to choose the training that you would like your workforce, your apprentices, to receive throughout their apprenticeship. If you're spending funds in your digital account or accessing funds through co-investment, which I will explain a little bit later on, then you can only spend it with an approved training provider. So all employers will be able to access a register of approved training providers through the Digital Apprenticeship Service. Apprenticeship training can either be on a new apprenticeship standard or an existing apprenticeship framework. We're not going to cover the detail of the difference between standards and frameworks today, but if you do want more information on that, again, please let me know. We have got a fantastic range of training providers across the South East Midlands, and indeed across England actually, who will be able to work with you to provide the right level of support and the right range of training that's going to be right for your business. So definitely, once you get registered onto that Digital Apprenticeship Service account in January, you will then be able to see the list of approved training providers through the new register that they're setting up for training providers, where you will be able to select your training from. So, endpoint assessment. Now this is something that's fairly new for training, for apprenticeship training, and we've tried to on the screen explain how it's going to work. So as an employer, you will need to select your training provider, and at that point you will also need to select your endpoint assessment body. Now the funding for the cost of endpoint assessment comes out of the total amount of the levy and the amount that can be allocated to that apprenticeship. So your training provider will be able to work that through with you. There is also an expectation that employers may want to negotiate on the price of training, and that will obviously decide on the training provider that you're working with and the volume of apprenticeships perhaps that you are purchasing from them, and the range and the level of apprenticeships that you're looking at. But do expect to have some communication with your training provider around the cost of training and also including that cost of endpoint assessment. Then the idea is your apprentice will undertake their apprenticeship, they'll undertake their training, and your training provider will get them ready to sit their endpoint assessment. Endpoint assessment could look different for every different apprenticeship that we've got at the moment. It's kind of a whole webinar on its own, but endpoint assessment basically is where all of that apprenticeship will come together and an independent body will verify that your apprentice has met those skills and competencies and behaviours. It could be through a number of different assessment methods. It could include creating a portfolio. It could include a professional discussion. It could include a workplace project. It's going to be different for every apprenticeship, but if you speak to your training provider, they will be able to explain to you what that endpoint assessment process will be. This is the way that you would purchase the training from the training provider. So your levy would be declared by yourself to HMRC, and your levy will then get paid by HMRC into your Digital Apprenticeship Service (DAS) account. Then once you've gone into the system and you've selected the training provider that you're going to work with, then the funding will be released to the training provider, and that funding will get released to the training provider over the duration of the entire apprenticeship. So your Digital Apprenticeship Service account will be able to forecast the cost of apprenticeship training over a number of years. So if, for example, you're signing up a member of staff to a 2 or 3 year apprenticeship, then that's how your levy will be forecast forward, linked to that individual in your apprenticeship account. I think this will all become much clearer in January when you're able to actually get onto the system and have a look at it and see how it's going to work. So what if you don't have enough funds in your levy pot? So you may find over the course of an apprenticeship that your funds aren't sufficient to be able to cover the cost of the apprenticeship training that you want to purchase for your organisation. This particularly could be the case for some employers who will only pay a small amount of levy, or for those who may have a variable pay bill and they may end up paying the levy in some months but not others. If you don't have enough money in your account in a particular month, then you will be asked to make a contribution towards the extra cost of training and to pay this directly to the training provider rather than through your digital account. You will be able to spread this contribution over the lifetime of the apprenticeship, and it will be based on a payment schedule that you agree with your provider. So the government will provide support to help you to meet these additional costs, and we call this co-investment. Basically, the co-investment rate will be, for every £1 that you put in, the government will put in £9. So the government will work out how much is due on top of your levy that would need to be paid. Then it would do a calculation through your Digital Apprenticeship Service account to work out how much more needs to be paid, and then it would apply the co-investment rate of £9 for every pound, and then there will be a way to notify you of what it is that you need to pay to your training provider. I hope that kind of probably clear as mud. You're probably sitting there thinking, oh goodness, how is this going to work? So I think, again, in January, once we can start playing around with it, you'll be able to really see how this is going to work. But basically, there will be the option, if you don't have sufficient funds within your levy account, to be able to top it up and access the co-investment rate. This is the co-investment rate that any non-levied employer will be accessing as well, unless they're exempt for paying fees. So if they're an employer with less than 50 employees, taking on a 16 to 18-year-old or a 19 to 24-year-old care leaver or a learner with an education, health and care plan, they are 100% funded. All other employers who are non-levied will be on this co-investment rate of 9 for 1. So I mentioned monthly variations. There could be times, particularly for employers who are affected by seasonality, where staff payroll bills will actually peak and trough throughout the year. So it could be that you would be paying the levy in some months but not in others. This is all going to be calculated through PAYE, so we're reassured by HMRC that the system will ensure that employers pay the correct amount of levy, and they will allocate in-year repayments if the pay bill reduces and the PAYE needs to be adjusted and the amount of levy being paid in needs to be adjusted. There are also some extra incentives that as an employer you may be entitled to. So there is extra support for taking on a 16 to 18-year-old apprentice or a 19 to 24-year-old apprentice who has an education, health and care plan provided by the local authority, or a 19 to 24-year-old who's been in the care of a local authority. The incentive rate is £1,000 and that gets paid both to the employer and to the training provider. So both parties receive that extra incentive of £1,000. But that's only for 16 to 18-year-olds and 19 to 24-year-olds with an education, health and care plan, or those who are care leavers. Thought it would be useful just to quickly summarise the different levels of apprenticeship that are available, because there's a great deal going on around apprenticeships. So just to familiarise you with the terminology, we've now got intermediate, advanced and higher, and intermediate would be equivalent to GCSEs, although you can't really apply academic levels to doing a job, but we'll go with it for today. So level 2 is equivalent to GCSEs, level 3 would be equivalent to A-levels, level 4 would be equivalent to a HNC or the first year of a degree, level 5 and level 6, level 5 second year of a degree, level 6 a full degree, and level 7 master's level. So just to break down higher and degree apprenticeships for you a little bit more. Higher apprenticeships is the term that's used to cover any apprenticeship at levels 4, 5, 6 or 7. If the level 6 contains a full bachelor's or honours degree, then it's also called a degree apprenticeship. And if the level 7 contains a master's, then it's called a degree apprenticeship as well. You can get higher apprenticeships at level 6 and level 7 that perhaps don't include a degree, and then they are just called higher apprenticeships, not degree apprenticeships. So sorry it's a little bit confusing, but higher apprenticeship is the umbrella term that covers anything at levels 4, 5, 6 and 7. And then it will depend if there's a full degree as part of that apprenticeship at level 6 or level 7 as to whether it gets called a degree apprenticeship as well. So we've included a couple of links here for you. The latest guidance on gov.uk, which is where you can go in and see all of the detail around the Apprenticeship Levy. And also there is an Apprenticeship Levy team. So we've included the Apprenticeship Levy email address. If you've got any detailed questions that you want answers to before the next set of guidance comes out, which is due on the 24th of October, so we've got just under a month to wait until that comes out, then please do drop them a line and let them know if you've got particular queries or questions, because the guidance on gov.uk is increasing every time they do an update. Now, additionally, we've got an event happening with SEMLEP on the 1st of December at the Open University in Milton Keynes, and it's called Apprenticeships A New World. SEMLEP and the Velocity Growth Hub are really keen to have your feedback as to what you would find useful within those workshops. It's most likely that we won't have the digital apprenticeship service for you to be able to play around with by then, although we may have some more screenshots that we're able to show you. But we're really keen, if you've got any ideas about what you would like in those workshops, we want to make it a really useful event for you. Also, I've included the National Apprenticeship Service helpline telephone number there so that you can give them a ring if you want to. Then Apprentice Makers. Now, Apprentice Makers is a really great portal where you can go in and you can put questions to other employers of apprentices. And then finally, we also have local apprenticeship ambassadors. So these are employers who employ apprentices locally across the South East Midlands who are more than happy to have a telephone conversation or perhaps to come out and see you to talk to you about implementing an apprenticeship programme for your organisation. And there's probably hundreds of other events and activities that are happening out there as well. You may already know a training provider that you want to work with and have a lot of this in hand with them, but I think it's also useful to just know about some of that other external support that's out there. So hopefully that has been a useful run through on where we are at with the levy so far. I apologise that we're still waiting for some of the detail, but I think we know a lot more than we did 6 months ago about the intricacies of how it's going to work and how it's going to interact with PAYE and the Digital Apprenticeship Service, at least in words, until we can see those screenshots or get the real thing in January to play around with. So now it's my chance to hand over to you. So if you are feeling brave and you would like to turn this into a bit of a radio broadcast, then put your hand up, and I'm just going to click down for everyone. Now, if you would like to put your hand up, please do so, and then that will tell me that you want me to unmute you and everyone will be able to hear you. That sounds scarier than it is, but it is a bit like a radio broadcast. If you've got any questions on anything that I've covered, then please type them into the questions box, and then I'll be able to take your questions from here. So, any questions coming through, please type them through if you would like to, or put your hand up by pressing the little yellow hand that will be appearing on the screen and send that through to me. Okay, looks like I've stunned you all into silence. Okay, well, if you want to find out more, we do have the SEMLEP apprenticeship portal, so www.semlep.com/apprenticeships. Actually, we have one question that's come through. Is the contract with an apprentice still going to be a contract for training rather than employment? There will be a couple of different contractual arrangements actually. So the apprenticeship contract that you will have with your employees will still be a contract of employment, exactly like you do at the moment. There's an additional piece that has to go into it called the Apprenticeship Agreement, which is available on gov.uk. There's a template that you can use, and that's available. Taking on an apprentice shouldn't change their contract of employment. So this could be for new staff coming into your organisation. It could be for your existing workforce. You may decide that there are people working within management, for example, who would be suitable to undertake a degree apprenticeship in management. We wouldn't expect you to change their contract of employment, but we would just need to add in the additional apprenticeship agreement. And that's a good point. We'll make sure that that's added to the SEMLEP portal for you. How do we apply for the co-investment top-up? So as an employer, you won't have to apply for the apprentice co-investment top-up. We believe at the moment that this will be applied automatically if there are insufficient funds within your levy account on the Digital Apprenticeship Service to be able to cover the cost of training for the duration of that apprenticeship pathway that your member of staff is undertaking. Again, it's really hard, I think, to describe it without being able to see it. So in a couple of months' time, in January, when we can get you to register and then have a play with your accounts, you should be able to see how that forecasting will work. If you ended up paying for something but then there were sufficient funds in your levy account, say the following month, then there seems to be an indication that they would look at adjusting your account and being able to reconcile that in some way. Again, we need to see the detail. There's just not enough, I feel, coming out at the moment from HMRC about the detail of how this will work. But I know there's a huge team at the Skills Funding Agency working on the detail of this. So we should see it fairly soon. Any other questions from anyone? No more hands up in the air. Okay, well, if you do have a question, then please do contact the SEMLEP team, the Velocity Growth Hub. Like I said, we've recorded today's webinar. We will send it out to you and we'll send you a copy of the slides if you want to use it for any staff training or dissemination within your own organisations. If you have any feedback, please let us know. If you would find it useful to have an update on this later in the year, perhaps in January, where we can give you access to a digital account and show you how it will work, we're more than happy to put that on for you as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope the rest of your week is all goes according to plan, and we'll get the details sent out to you as soon as we can. Many thanks. Bye-bye.